Alright, here we go. Video number 3. I was going to do video number 3 on bearing edges. I'm going to make that number 4. I've had some further thoughts on the subject, as well as comments, messages, questions, either on YouTube or a discussion forum where these are posted. So I wanted to address some of that stuff for the overall discussion. Listen, I'm no paragon of wisdom. And if I'm wrong on all this, I don't mind being wrong. That's fine. I'm looking at the subject of drum shells. I went out to the shop yesterday and I put 6 bearing edges, 6 different edges on these 3 shells, and that'll be the last video to show that. But the idea of drum shells, plywood drum shells especially, but in some respects it can go across the boards of all materials. All things being equal, you got a 1/4 of an inch plywood shell. How much difference is there between a 1/4 of an inch plywood shell and a 3/16 plywood shell and a 1/8 plywood shell, and the thicknesses of the plies and stuff? Why do they make plywood drums anyway? Plywood drums are made because they're less expensive to deal with, dealing with flitches of veneer and gluing veneer. It's less expensive to deal with than solid wood. And the idea of being able to run plies in different directions for shell integrity, keeping it round, that's another thing about ply. But when you're dealing with sound, I'm going to jump ahead of myself here. Let me just start off one thing at a time as it's in my head. Number one, Ford Drum Company. I'm not an employee of the Ford Drum Company. I don't know the guys at the Ford Drum Company. I will say when I saw this one video of the Ford Drum Company at NAMM, I did send an email off to the Ford Drum Company saying that, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I've been doing this for however many years, etc., etc. And I did receive a response from Jay Galen, one of the guys there at Ford Drum Company. Nice guy. But that's it. That's my extent with the Ford Drum Company. I'm not an employee. I don't own Ford drums. I think they make fine instruments, just the way everybody out there makes fine instruments. Everybody's making nice instruments. But I just wanted to get rid of that first. Okay, that comes up. I'm not an employee of the Ford Drum Company, and I don't have any stake. I don't have any stock in their company and stuff like that to promote them. Do it yourself. Do it yourself drums sound as good as manufactured drums? Yes, they sound as good. They can even sound better than some manufactured drum. It just depends on the component parts, right? I can buy these shells, I can put the lugs on, and I put the heads on, I can put the bearing edges on, or I can have the company you buy the shells from put the bearing edges on. Whatever you want, they'll do it, costs a little more. But I can put the bearing edges on myself. Look, when I started out on Ludwig, right? And, for most of my young life, I played Ludwig. I had a set of Remo Leggero drums. I don't know if you remember those. They were just a single head, very shallow shell, kind of a traveling set. I just ordered everything, 8-inch to 22-inch bass drums, double bass set. I ordered all of them. And I had a Remo Leggero set, Rototom set as well at one point. In 1991, though, and I don't remember the influence that caused me to know about making your own drums, but I bought some shells, different size shells, and I took all the parts off the Remo Leggero drums, and I put them on the shells that I got. And just put a lacquer finish on, a simple lacquer finish. Wasn't the most beautiful finish, but oh my, was I surprised. Well, 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 well. This is not rocket science. You too, my son, can make a drum set. So then I went out and got some more Remo lugs so I could put bottom heads on the drums, and I never looked back. I just went from there and I never looked back. I tell people this, look, if you can throw a baseball, if you can catch a baseball, if you can hit a baseball, you can make a drum set. If you can use a drill, you can make a drum set. It is not rocket science. And all the hype in this industry about making people think that this is some kind of a rocket ship or something, and you've got to do all these special things to it. No. And I understand, you got to advertise, right? You got to sell your product. Got to toot your own horn. I get all that. But there comes a point where it's just nonsense. You can make your own drums. I have been since 1991. I haven't looked back. My drums sound good. Anybody that makes drums, every single day now, somebody out there is making his own drum set from component parts sold by various merchants that are out there on the web. Or you may have a merchant like the guy in Nashville. If you're in Nashville, you just go right down there, buy what you need. So yeah, you can make your own drums. They sound just as good as manufactured drums. Now I will say finishes, that takes some time. That's actually more difficult to do and get right. Putting a finish on it. If you want a mirror finish, yeah, that's going to be a lot of work, But you can put wraps. Like I said, this is tooled leather on this set. You can put different things on the cover of a drum. Doesn't really affect the sound at all. So in finishing, somebody says, well, I don't know how to use polyurethanes or lacquers or any of these finish materials that are out there, tung oil. Tung oil is very easy to use. It's very forgiving. You take a sponge brush and you just go around your shell, take a hair dryer and you tack it up and just sand, put your coats on and go along. Most of the time I do tung oil, 8 to 12 coats by the time I'm done, and I see a reflection of myself that good enough for me. I don't go for mirror finishes because they scratch so easily. Just your finger on a mirror finish will scratch it. So I've never really bothered getting there. It looks really nice, and there are companies that do go that, to that end, and it's more time, more money. Drums cost more. I get that. But in the sense of, where's my? That sounds weird with a finger. So, maple shell, 5x10, half tom thing. I got this idea because I was going through the rehearsal room one day and there was a pearl free floater off to the side. And the heads were detuned, snares were off, and I just walked by it and I tapped it. And the sustain just seemed to go on forever. Wow. And so I, kept tapping it. And then I looked around at my drum set, which were, either square shells or I forget what they were at the time, but they were, power shells, deeper shells, whatever. And so I zip on the table saw, cut them all down. And I really like that sound a lot. I like the rebound, the feel. So I have half toms are my favorites. But anyway, so the idea of volume comes up. All right, I never said that you can have volume differences depending on shell material. Why? Because the more dense something is, the more the sound waves and the sound pressures and whatnot are going to be inside that sound chamber, and it can create more volume. So you can, drums that are made of metal can be louder. Obviously, drums that are made of acrylic can be louder. Not that acrylic is heavier necessarily than a plywood shell, but acrylic is there's no fiber in it. It's just solid. It's a solid material, not like our organic cellular structure of wood and whatnot. So that they can be loud, and so volume-wise. So why did this drum, when I have all my drums here, why did this drum sound loud? To me, sitting here, it sounds louder. I listened to the video. I said, yeah, it does sound louder. Well, not just the maple hoops, which I believe allow the heads to just express themselves to a greater degree. I don't put vent holes on my drums. I haven't for 20 years. And that I just want all that sound. I want it in that chamber. I want it in the shell. I want it inside the drum, between the heads, to trap it all. And so that might contribute some to the volume too. But a lot of times, most of the time, it's going to be just the density, the hardness of the material can create more volume. Somebody mentioned, I don't have all the drums here now, but they said, hey, you did change some of the bearing edges on those drums. And I did, so I wanted them all to sound their optimum. I understand, the edge that goes straight up the sidewall and a 45 back cut, right? It's very easy to do, it's fast, and so on less expensive drums, that's the edge that you would find. Although, in the 80s and 90s, that edge that was all the rage. That became popular. And Premier, I walked into a drum shop, Portland Percussion in Maine, where I used to live. I walked in there one day, looking around at all the drums, and I walked past this Premier set just tapped on this 14 by 14 floor tom. I might as well have been listening to a church organ. It just sounded so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And I just tapped it again, tapped it again. Well, Premier was making their shells just a little bit shorter, or a little bit, the diameter, just undersized shells, so that they sat just right on that apex of any head you put on it. And boy, those things just boom. It was just gorgeous sound. So the shells were a little bit smaller, and the heads could seat very good, very nice, and it just created a beautiful sound. And so that aspect of the edges, I understand why they put those edges on drums that are less expensive. So somebody said, you kind of proved the point that more expensive drums are worth it because they will have better bearing edges on it. Yeah, I can't argue that point. That's logical. That's obvious. I just wanted to look at the subject of wood. Is there a difference between, are there tremendously different audible, tonal things that you hear between basswood and poplar and maple and birch and luan and whatever, all right? And there's not. Here's another reason why. The Janka scale, somebody asked me about, what do you think of the balance of a drum? And I mentioned in the video, yes, as a single unit, the drum is going to be mounted somehow so it can freely resonate to its full extent as a composed, finished unit, right? Shell, lugs, heads, hoops. And so you're, as a finished unit, yeah, there is a balanced type of situation. Noble and Cooley used to address this. They had some innovations. They've been around for well over 100 years, Noble and Cooley Drum Company. And they used to have nodal point, where they believed scientifically, as far as physics, you could put a lug on the shell to keep it, the least amount of restriction on the shell as possible. The nodal point, they called it. They had lugs. They had those. You had like a top lug with a tube coming down, and bottom heads, no bottom lugs, just right up into that tube with just the top lug. That was a nice idea. So they've done a lot of things dealing with component parts and balancing a drum as a single unit so it'll sound its best. And yeah, I don't argue that. It doesn't take away my belief that the sound of a drum is the heads. You want the heads to give off as much. As a matter of fact, here's another thing that came up. Okay, this idea of I get frustrated. I really do. Common sense. What little thin piece of mylar, right? Thin mylar. It might as well be paper. All right, little thin piece of plastic. When you hit a drum head, and you can do this as a test, right? Just, seat the drum in your lap, hit the drum, lightly put a finger on the shell, and lightly put a finger on the resonant head, and see the difference in vibration that you get. Do you honestly think that there's some kind of a shock wave that goes down through this thin piece of plastic? When you hit the center of a drum, this thin piece of plastic is sending some kind of shock wave down through the shell walls? What? Seriously? What if we changed the material of this, okay? What if I used canvas, all right? You stretch canvas to paint. So suppose I had a head made of canvas and had a hoop and everything, and I could tension it, stretch. Do you think striking a canvas head, do you think canvas is going to send shock waves down through the shell? Shock waves are not going down the shell. They're going down from head to head, and then they're moving around inside the shell. That's why Ludwig Sr. used to say the sound of a drum are the inside plies, because that's where the sound is. The sound of the drum is the inside. And once the sound waves get through into the core of the drum, basically everything's dissipated. And so unless you're playing a quarter note fill, so this idea of shell walls and vibration, shock waves going down through oh, come on. That's not even common sense. And I'd like to, here's another subject too. They're coming into my mind as I'm going here, okay? If I have to go to a laboratory and I have to use spectrometers of some kind to show the difference of what shells do when heads are struck. What? What do I need a sec? Am I going to sit next to a spectrometer when I play drums to tell me what I'm listening to? I'm going by my ears. I'm just going by my ears. So whatever somebody might see on a spectrometer, well, maybe a device, a machine, high tech can pick up differences. What your ears pick up, that's something else altogether. So to me, that's hype too. That's used and it's out. You want to use spectrometers and stuff to sell your drums, okay. But in real life, in practical use, that's what's the point? It's something to do to sell your drums. That's fine, sell your drums. But the idea of shockwaves going down through shell walls from a thin piece of plastic, yeah, no, that's not how drums work. It's just not how drums work. It's not how the shells are responding to anything. And you can tell just by touching the resonant head and touching the shell when you hit the batter head, you're hardly going to feel any vibration here at all. And you might feel some, but like I said, once you get those lugs on there and everything's constricted, this is basically a dense sound chamber. That's all it is. It's not so much about wood anymore. The Janka scale, for those that don't know what the Janka scale is, it's mostly used in flooring, but they take a steel ball and they drop it a certain distance, and the dent that it puts into the wood is used to grade out the density and the hardness of the various woods. What is it? I forget, lignum vitae. That's like rock. That's an Australian tree. There are some hard Australian woods that you will tear your tools apart, man. But what's used for drums, right? You got maple, you got birch, and then they use the basswood, which is very soft. Poplar's fairly soft too. It's kind of an in-between thing. But look, what do violins use? They use spruce, and you get beautiful tone. I always wanted to make a set out of spruce. Maybe I will someday. But anyway, as far as drums go, when you look at the Janka scale and you look at those woods that are normally used in plywood shells, they're all about the same density. They're all the same hardness. They may look different. They may have a different type of cellular structure, open grain, closed grain, fine grain, coarse grain. They may look different, but as far as contributing to these tremendous differences in sound, like I said, somebody make a video and show all this stuff. It could be so easily done. And let's talk about that too, my ears, my hearing, okay? I have good hearing. I wear ear protection, and I have since I've been a kid. I don't even like the sound of drums, sitting behind a drum set and all that volume and the decibels and sound pressure levels. I don't even like it. I'd rather hear things more individually, and wearing some kind of sound protection, I can hear it better. It accentuates the low end, high end, filter cut and whatnot, and that's fine. But my hearing has been protected all my life. So whereas human hearing is what, 20 to 20,000 K, baby is born, and 20 to 20 K. As you get older, it starts dropping down, and by the time you finish out your life, it might be around 13 K. Right now, my hearing, any test that I have done is somewhere between 14.5 and 15.5, 16 K. All right. Well, what's the frequency range of drums? It's about 50 to 1 K. That's it. 1,000 kilohertz. Now, how does that affect an objective listening test? It doesn't. It doesn't affect a listening test at all. My hearing is just fine. I'm well above the range, and that and 1,000 K. That's actually kind of high. I'm giving it some. Because most tests on drums don't include 6-inch toms or popcorn snares. All right, so I'll raise that frequency level on drums, and you get up to 1,000 K. Or 1K, 1,000 hertz. So ears and objective listening. Now, what about because this has come up. How do I can't address this. The emotional aspect. Some people are saying, look, You hear drums one way, I hear drums another way. I don't know, what does that mean? I'm just trying to do things objectively. Boom, 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 boom. Are there any tremendous differences in sound? A little bit of volume differences, maybe a little more of a throaty sound or something, depth to because the shells are deeper. Maybe you hear these subtleties, Mike. But when you take a drum set that is 9 by 10 next to a drum set that is 8 by 10, next to a drum set that is 7 by 10, next to a drum set that is 6 by 10, and you just play the drums, are you actually going to hear those differences in depth? I didn't hear any tremendous in the differences here of the toms I had, different materials and everything. There wasn't anything that jumped out at me so startling that it was just an incredible difference. So all the stuff about shells and all this other stuff. Why is a deeper tom, quote unquote, punchy? Because it takes longer for the sound wave to go from the batter head to the resonant head, just by what? A nanosecond? You know, I mean, how you measure something like that. So you've got a deeper shell, air pressure, sound waves are inside the chamber, and they're said to get a punchier sound rather than the more lively sound you'd get from a shallow tom, right? And I don't argue with that. Whatever kind of subtlety and nuance that can be called, I don't hear it as being so dramatically different. And that's just the idea. That's not how the shell is constructed, other than its depth. All right. So that's just whatever sound is there because the shell's a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. Obviously, when you listen to octobans or tube drums, it takes. I've made my own octobans. And you get that sound. Why? Because it's taking a much longer time for the sound wave. I say much longer. It's taking a longer time for the sound wave to get out of that tube. So as it's going, it's taking a longer. It's common sense. So that's why octobans sound a little different. They get that sound to them, right? Very deep shells. And I had 6 by 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30. Were the shell sizes I made, and on that 6 by 30, I mean, it was just, you could just tell. You could tune all the heads the exact same tension, and you'd still get that long, drawn out sound coming out of that 6 by 30, graded back up to a 6 by 6. So yeah, shell depth, it contributes. It contributes. The idea of balance, all right, and being one unit. Yeah, I don't argue that, okay? I'm talking about the hype in the manufacturing industry over all this stuff about shells. Most people will say, if you read an article, you look on the internet, people will say the sound of a drum is the shell. No. The sound of a drum is the heads. And like I said, the reason you know that is because of Remo Rototoms and Arbeiter flats and other drums that sound like drums, because there's a head that's tensioned on some kind of a frame, and you get a sound of a drum. And so the shell colors the sound in minute ways. That's all. If you could have a drum shell made out of lignum vitae, which is like way up at the top of the Janka scale, I mean, that's hard stuff. If you could, you'd probably have a drum that sounded very close to a metal drum. I mean, it's so hard that the sound waves are in there, so you get more volume, and you get maybe a brighter sound or something. But yeah, the harder the density of the material is what will color the sound of the heads that's coming off the batter head, moving in concert with the resonant head. Sound waves moving around. All right, so that's kind of my bottom line. I believe in the balance of a drum. In my drums, I want as little metal on the shell as possible, so I've got one lug in the center of all my toms, even 7 by 14, 8 by 16, 9 by 18, 10 by 20. They all have a single lug, and the rods are just a little bit longer. And I love the sound of them. I really like the sound of a shallower shell where the heads. Matter of fact, you can go back and look at one of the other videos of the last prototype of the tabletop pancake drum set I made. You're talking, I've got 14, 16, and 18-inch quote-unquote floor toms on there. Well, the shells are only a total of 4 or 5 inches deep. and you hit those floor toms, you hit those larger heads, boom, those things go off like crazy. And I would rather feel the rebound of a shallower drum than that. It's kind of like a feeling of the waves of the ocean when you try to do a roll on a floor tom, because it's doing this, it's going back and forth, rather than that, which keeps things more consistent. So I like this, I like the feel of a rebound of shallower toms all the way. But if you had, if you were to, have the tabletop set, and you could see that, the sum total of the parts, the 10-inch tom right in front of me, all right, so it's 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and an 18 over here. The 10-inch tom, I just could not get it right. What's wrong with this thing? No matter how I tension that. Because they were single-headed drums before I went to double heads, because they were single heads, I was using Evans G12, slightly thicker head, right? I think a thicker head sounds better on a single-headed tom than thinner heads. And I just couldn't get, so I wrote to Evans and said, I think I've got a sour head here. I mean, I bought this many heads and everything sounds fine. This 10-inch just will not tune up. They sent me another head. Oh, drum sounded fine. So yeah, the balance of all your component parts. If a drum doesn't tune up right, it could be the heads. It just could be a squeaker that just goes through the assembly line and something didn't come out right. And so it could be your heads. So yeah, there's definitely a component part to this. In trying to do this thing as objectively as possible, I just wish, here's the thing, man. Oh yeah, this too. I was back at the emotional aspect. People are saying you hear drums one way, you hear drums another way. Well, objectively, everybody's got a hearing frequency range that they can hear drums. But they're not losing anything because of the frequency range of drums. So they're not losing anything. But then there's the idea of, do drums, this is an emotional thing. This is in the head now. This is not in the ears, this is in the head. Is it possible that a black lacquer drum set sounds different to somebody who is really into wood grain? And so they look at some kind of a fade finish, the Tequila Sunrise kind of fade finish, and that really turns them on. Piano black lacquer, yeah, not so much. If it's the same drum set with a different finish, is it possible that it can sound different to somebody who's not into one finish and is into another? I don't know. But that's incredibly subjective. So, I mean, the emotional aspect of drums, yeah, play what you want, and if it inspires you to play better for whatever reasons, yeah, man, go for it, all right? Your choice. I'm just trying to point out that all the stuff that is said about drum shells in this industry, it's way over the top. Way, way over the top. This is another thing that came up, and somebody misunderstood. When I talk about, here's the sound of your drum, do you think you could tell the difference when you're sitting behind the set, playing a full set, in a band, and then doing it live through a PA? I'm not talking about the audience. That's got nothing to do with this. The audience, you could play cardboard boxes, and they wouldn't know the difference. They wouldn't know the difference. I'm talking about the drummer who's got to listen to mic'd drums in monitors, okay? And you can do whatever you want at the boards. All of us have been to concerts and heard drums that are very expensive drums that sound terrible. They sound like mud. Been to concerts or clinics or whatever. I say, wow, those sound terrible. Who is at the boards? What are they doing? So I'm talking about what a drummer is going to hear in his monitors from his mic'd drums. All right, I'm not talking about the audience. So what I'm saying is, if you have these different 10-inch toms that I had here, and they're mic'd up, they're all mic'd up exactly the same, how much difference are you going to hear? That's what I meant by live. When you're playing the drums live and you're listening to a monitor mix, when you're listening to the band, and you got the whole drum set going with cymbals and everything, these nuances and these details and these subtleties, I just believe they're lost. Now, look, let's talk about these details. You know what I wish? Here's what I wish. And I've mentioned this before. The Ford guys went to the Sonar booth, and I won't say that story again. They went to the Sonar booth, and I don't know if the Sonar meant to have all their drums there so you could hear differences, because they didn't. And they brought other people over and had them turn their backs and say, listen, do you hear any differences? No. I don't think Sonor meant that. But for a service to the prospective buyer, all the drum companies, all the model lines that are out there, and you heard that Yamaha Rydeen, it sounded just as good. A Luan plywood, just 5 lugs, and it sounded just as good as the rest of the drums. What? So when I did that test, when I first said, I know what I'm going to get. So I'm going to buy these drums on eBay. I got all these used drums, because I had my own maple drums. So I said, I'll buy birch, I'll buy maple, and I'll buy all this other stuff. And that 10-inch tom, the $10 tom, blew me away when I heard that. So I said, I knew it. It's the sound of the drums is the heads. It's the heads. The shell colors things in subtle ways. Why don't manufacturers make videos at their websites, on YouTube, Vimeo, whatever? Why don't they take a tom from every single line and just set it up and say boom, 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 whatever that you're supposed to hear because of these shell configurations. You're supposed to, and then they tell you, okay, here's what you're hearing here because of this. Here's what you know why? Because there aren't such tremendous differences that video is going to do a single thing. That's why they don't make those videos. They could, but they don't. Every company should do that for prospective buyers. Here's what our shell does to the sound. If the sound of a drum is the shell, not the heads, but it's the shell, then there should be big differences. Well, there's not, because on the Janka scale, most of the woods used for plywood drums are the same hardness. So there's not going to be tremendous differences. Nothing jumps out at you that they could line up all their shells and they could say, here's what you're hearing. No, because they're all going to sound basically the same. Just like that video the Ford drum company put out from NAMM. They're all going to sound basically the same. They could do it, and it would be a tremendous service to the drumming community. They don't do it. As a matter of fact, somebody sent me a video, Yamaha. Now, I've never heard Phoenix drums up close and personal. I've only heard them on videos. They don't sound any different to me, considering the price tag. But some guy plays 4 or 5 different Yamaha drum sets, and I'm listening to them with good ear monitors. I don't know if I already showed these in one of the other videos. The Oppo PM3 headphones. These are an eye opener, if not an ear opener. These are unbelievable. Wow, the details that I've never heard sound. I got these for mixing our music. I've never heard sound so good as when I put these things on. I was, wow. So when I listen to those Yamaha drum sets with these on, I don't hear any big differences. Maybe there was a little more oomph in the floor tom on the Phoenix set, but I didn't hear any big differences. The recording custom sounded a little drier, and I thought probably because they have those long lugs attached to the cell, affixed to the shell, so that's going to constrict it even more. But I didn't really hear any major differences. DW, this is not put out by an individual. This is put out by the DW company. They have a video with maple birch, I think it is cherry and oak. 4 different drum sets, drummer and some well-known recording engineer in the industry out in, I think it was California. And so, and you look at the comments, and it's like 95% of the comments are all the same. And here's what it is. The guy's playing the drums, right? And rather than just take the 12-inch tom from each set and go boom, 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 the guy plays the drums, and you're trying to listen, but you can't hear anything because the 2 guys are talking over the entire video. All 4 drum sets, they just don't stop talking. And you see all the comments. Why are you guys talking? Shut up. What was the point of that? I can't hear the drum. You just look at the comments. It's hilarious. I'm thinking, why did DW do this? Why would they put out a video like that? Where I'm struggling to hear the supposed differences these 2 guys are talking about when they're talking over the entire video. Is it because the differences really aren't that great. That they're so subtle, you really wouldn't hear it. So I've got to go by the anecdotal evidence of the drummer and the engineer telling me what they sound like. What? Yeah, that, see, these are the kind of things that they fry me. I'm telling you, they just fry me, you know? But there's no common sense to that. Look, details that go into drums, all right? I'm going to finish it off here. The sound of a drum, my observation and experience has been, it's the heads. Change the heads, change the personality and character of the drum. You know, just tune the heads differently. And you can get a birch drum and a maple drum and a poplar drum and whatever, oak drum. You can get them all to sound the same just by changing the heads and changing a little tuning pitch or something. You get them all to sound exactly the same. So if there's any subtle differences, here's the thing about the balance, the full aspect of what a drum is, the details, all right? You have more expensive wood. And again, capitalism, passing the price on to the consumer. Costs me more to make it, then I'm going to pass that price on to the consumer. That's business. That's how it's done. Not a problem with that. But, so you might use more expensive wood, more expensive metal for your parts, more expensive finishes, including chrome on the hardware. More expensive finishes will cost more. Different, better, more options in design features in hardware. All right, so all of these things go into adding to the price of a drum set. What do these things actually give you when you're all said and done? Well, generally things will tune up easier, setup will be easier, the cosmetic and structural integrity and longevity of the drums. A drum you buy today will look and sound the same 50 years from now. And so those are the kind of details that go into those aspects of differences in drums, and whether or not those details justify the price tags, that's entirely up to you. That's your call. All right. There are people that swear by the drums they have. When I get around to the bearing edges, I'll do that next. I've just got to set these up in the most simple way possible to get sound out of them, and then I'll do that next. But the idea of details, yes, when you go out and buy drums, depending on what your budget is, whatever your budget is, get the most details for your money. All right, get details in your, in your lugs and in your finishes if it's important to you. Get details in your hardware and how things adjust and whatnot. Design features there. The integrity of the drum. If it's almost like furniture. People buy a set of drums. Most drummers, they don't keep those drums for 5-6 years. About the same amount of time somebody keeps a couch and then buys another one nowadays. There's no such thing as heirloom furniture anymore, and there's no such thing as heirloom drums. There could be, and drum companies will put details into their instruments to be able to pass it on down to generation after generation. I saw a video, amazing video. Memphis Drum Shop. I just saw it on the sidebar, so I looked at it. And some guy, his grandfather, had a set of 1928 Ludwigs. And he had a trap case, and they were opening the trap case, and they were taking out the blocks and the bells and all the stuff that this guy used in the orchestra pit, whatever. Big 28-inch bass drum, 14 by 28. Then he got around to the snare drum, an engraved Black Beauty with it. It looked like, gold, brass, or even copper hardware. I couldn't quite tell on the screen. It was almost in mint condition. The calf heads, oh man, unbelievable. And so yeah, I don't know how do you even put a value on a snare drum like that. And the whole set, they showed the catalog, $169 for the whole set. Wow. What are you going to pay now? I could buy a used car for what a drum set costs. It's ridiculous. Come on. A car has how many moving parts in it? How many electrical and all this stuff in an automobile? And then I'm going to pay a drum set. I'm going to pay. So that's your call. You decide if the details that go into a drum and the hype about shells is worth the extra price that you're going to pay. I'm just trying to do something objectively for the drumming community to think about, whoever comes upon the videos, just to think about when you go to buy drums. That's all. It's not rocket science. You can make your own drums. It's not rocket science. And so the idea of the details and what you are willing to pay for, you know, that you could have somebody make you a total custom drum set, top to bottom, you know. Something as outrageous as Carl Palmer's stainless steel kit back in the days of ELP. A stainless steel engraved with hunting scenes and, you know, custom made rack and electronics and all that stuff that went into it. And the bass drum alone, he said, weighed around 200 pounds. It took 2 guys to put it in place. So yeah, you can go as far as you want. I mean, that's totally up to you. But the sound of a drum, I believe, is the heads. It's not the shell. So what I'm going to do next on video number 4 is I already put the different bearing edges on the shells, 6 different edges. We'll put the same heads on them as we just did in the test here, and we'll see what actual audible differences that there are, and see if a lot of the stuff that's said about bearing edges doesn't have a little bit of hype in it too. And so that's what we'll do next. Video number 4 will be bearing edges and sound. All right. So thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Keep the discussion going. You know, more questions, more comments, more observation on your part. Especially guys that get into making their own drums. You know, they'll have their comments about what they've experienced. And I think that this will be all good. If we just look at this and, you know, just look at it. Like I said, I'm not putting down any drum companies. Everybody makes great instruments, okay? I've got a DW, you know, black nickel over brass over there. I've got a Tama steel snare. The rest of the snares I've made myself. But I've got other companies' stuff. Everybody makes good stuff, you know. So I'm not putting anybody down. I just don't understand the hype. I don't understand the ultra hype that actually borders on or is actual falsehood. I don't understand why that is there. Why things have gotten so desperate in the manufacturing industry that you have to say things that are not true to sell drums. What's wrong with that picture? That just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. For me. And maybe this is all moot. Other people say, yeah, I don't care. Anybody can hype what they want. Doesn't matter to me. Well, it doesn't matter to me when the kids are bugging their parents to buy drums because of all these things that they see in the ads and all the things that they see. And the parents are going to spend all this money for stuff that's not going to sound any better or different than stuff that costs a lot less. And that goes for adults too, that are if they're buying into the hype. That's just what I'm trying to address here. Spend what you want, your money. Spend what you want, get what you want, and if it inspires you to play better, that's your gig. Okay, that's your thing. Just looking at it objectively from sound and plywood drums and the hype that's out there, that's what I'm trying to address. Level playing field, man. Come on. Let's just deal with things that are actually so. That's what I'm trying to deal with. So thanks for watching, and we'll get video 4 up there sometime in the near future.